So good afternoon, everyone. Once again, my name is Charlotte Regula Whitefield, and I am here today as the Oregon Conservation Recreation Fund Program Coordinator here at Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we are going to be doing a short informational for our upcoming, currently active Winter 2023 request for proposals. So throughout today's presentation, I'll be providing just a short little introduction about what our program is, what we're really looking for in this current round of RFP or request for proposals, and then also making sure that we walk through the new format for proposals. It's very similar to what you've seen in the past if you have applied to the OCRF, but it is a little bit different. So I will apologize since I'm working off of only one screen right now. I am not going to be able to see your faces or see you raise your hand during the presentation. So if you have a question about the slide that I'm currently on, please feel free to actually unmute and just interrupt me if you have something that you want to answer within the moment. Otherwise, please feel free to also just hold questions till the end. I'm more than happy to bring these slides back up and walk through. My presentation really is only going to be about probably 10 to 20 minutes today, and the rest of this time is going to be yours to ask any questions that you want. And this presentation is being recorded currently and will be posted on our OCRF ODFW website for you to have future reference for. So with that, let's get started. So the OCRF was formed in 2019, and we really started granting in 2020. And our foundational mandate is really to increase the department or ODFW's capacity to protect and enhance species and habitats identified in our Oregon Conservation Strategy, and really to create new opportunities for Oregonians to be part of and to enjoy responsibly the outdoors. So with that, the OCRF really has a dual mission that we try to strive for in everything that we're doing. And it really balances between conservation and recreation and that intersection between the two. Very much about conserving species and habitats within our Oregon Conservation Strategy. If you're unfamiliar with that, please let me know. I can send you a link. Otherwise, you can Google it. If you are applying to the OCRF, it's going to be a document that's going to be really important for you to familiarize yourself with. Also, expanding outdoor recreation. We use that term very loosely. Really, how do you get Oregonians outside and enjoying their surroundings in a very conservation-minded aspect? So that once again, the intersection. Healthy ecosystems, connecting families and individuals, specifically underserved communities with the outdoor, and really help Oregonians take voluntary actions through community science and other aspects to really help preserve our environment. Outdoor equity is really key, and also access to information from projects is very, very key aspect to the OCRF and how projects are evaluated within the program. So regardless if you're doing a hardcore science-based project, so studying soil, biodiversity in a wildfire impacted area, or a very human-focused recreation project, such as increasing access to knowledge on hunting with underserved communities. We want both of these types of projects to think about outdoor equity and access to information. That said, and I love to kind of stress this repeatedly, especially for some of our traditional science-based projects, outdoor equity and access to information does not necessarily equate to you having to do community science. But what it does equate to is a meaningful engagement of Oregonians, how and where it's appropriate in your project. If you're dealing with a very, very sensitive area, such as a wildfire area, you don't want tons of children traipsing around in different areas, disturbing your habitat. But that said, baked into your project could be a distribution of information from that project into the communities that are impacted and also those that tend not to have access to the information. So that's one example. I'm more than happy to kind of think about that with you. And on the flip side of that, related, if your project's very recreation focused, think about how do you increase outdoor equity within your recreation aspect and also the conservation lens. So make sure you think about who is participating in your project. Can you have other individuals or voices in the room? And most importantly, how do you increase conservation mindedness in your outdoor recreation aspect? Can you do education of the surrounding, what is sensitive, what is not? Can you think about other ways of where would you recreate and how would you recreate that is mindful to the conservation lens? So to start with, the OCRF is funded by a variety of different funding sources. And this is really important for our grantees because it slightly does not change our mission, but slightly changes our focus of what we tend to fund in every round. One thing just to keep in mind is that the OCRF is funded by, as you can see here, a wide range of different sources. Primarily, about 70% of our funds come from Oregon legislative funds, but we also have donations and all sorts of other dollars. And this is important because our current pot of money that we're funding out of for this round of RFP is the Oregon Drought Planning. OCRF, as part of the 2022 legislative session, received $4 million focused on drought. And really the way that we're focusing these funds through our RFP is really thinking about drought and ecosystem resilience of aquatic habitats, wildfires, and how do we make sure that in a drought situation, we educate and recreate and communicate properly about the impacts of drought and how Oregonians should and can still interact with their environments during drought. That said, it's very, very important that you'll see in the application materials moving on when we review them together. If your project does not have a drought or a wet or a wildfire lens, that does not mean do not apply. When you think back to the diagram I showed earlier, we have many different sources of funding. We want everyone to continue to apply to the OCRF, but we want people to be mindful that the majority of our funding will still be put towards this priority area of drought. And there's going to be questions within the application, if you haven't looked at it already, that kind of ask you, how does your project relate to this? So if you're answering that question, you're like, wow, I really have to kind of think hard and spin this a little harder than I would expect, then you're probably not drought related, and that's okay. Just say your project's not drought related. But most things can be linked to drought because everything in Oregon is tied to water. And I'm always happy to talk with applicants to kind of think about that and think about, especially for our recreation projects, we really encourage you to add a deliberate but thoughtful lens of how can we encourage proper and responsible recreation in the times that we live in now. So reason why all of you are here is that the winter 2023 call for proposals is open. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of our basic guidelines, then I'm going to go to our website. So apologies, I'm going to kind of be flipping my screens on and off. And then we're going to be just basically here until you guys run out of questions. A couple major overhead things to consider right now. So the winter 2023 call for proposals opened in January 30th. So it's been open for a couple weeks now. This grant application will remain open for about 60 days. It closes on March 27th. The maximum allowable size of a grant is going to be $50,000. This is what it's been for the last couple rounds. That said, I highly encourage you that if you have small projects, please put them in. There is no competitive edge for asking for the largest amount of money. Also, just keep in mind that round numbers always look a little odd when you look at budget sheets. And what I mean by that is that if your project really costs $50,000 on the dot, when you fill out your budget sheet, really help show that. If your project costs $48,596, that sounds, when you think about your budget, a little bit more reasonable. Also, and this is kind of the other side of this coin, if your project's only $1,000 or $2,000, please apply. There's actually going to be a interest in trying to make sure that we fund a wide range of projects. So if you have those little projects, put them in for sure. If you have those big projects, put them in for sure, but don't feel that your project is too small to be included. Another thing to consider here is that any public or private nonprofit can apply, and you will need to show that you have a 501c3 status. We do not accept applications for 501c4s, and I'm happy to talk with you a little bit more if that's something that individuals are interested in learning more about. That said, if you are not a 501c3 and you have a different classification, if you are still kind of a not-for-profit, but just not with that status, because there's a couple different gray areas to that, always reach out. We do allow and encourage fiscal sponsors, where there's some organizations that have not gotten this status yet, but meet the intent of what it would be, and they can partner with another organization to apply. We've done this quite a bit with some HOAs applying with a local water conservation district to do work in an area. And there's other analogies to this.
Charlotte?
Yep.
Hello,
Go ahead.
this is Brian Clapp. So a county agency or a special district can apply as well, correct?
Yes. So thank you for that. And as I said, apologies, I can't see you guys. Almost all, and I say almost all, there might be a few variations, government organizations can apply. So that would be state, local, and county governments, state agencies, tribal governments, soil and water districts, water conservation areas. All of you apply. And if you are questioning that, I can always look up your status for you.
Thank you. I'm a county government. I'm with the county government. I just wanted to clarify on that. Thank you.
Yep. For all intents and purposes, all governments fall under the 501c3 status. I'm just going to pause to see if there's any other questions, and please feel free to interrupt me. There's no problems with that. Another thing to kind of, I guess, stress here also is that a single organization can apply multiple times as long as they're distinct and unrelated or basically unrelated, unlinked projects. So within the single winter 2023 project, an example that I like to give is a group like, I'll use Trout Unlimited. Not to pick on them, but they're just one of our organizations that apply quite a bit. They can apply for a project, or any single organization can apply for a project in, say, your East region and your West region. You can do a stream restoration and a fish release. As long as those two projects within the same RFP are completely distinct and do not tie to one another. And the reason for that is there's no guarantees that one, if not both, if not none of the projects would actually be funded. So we cannot have that link. You are also able to
Charlotte?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but right there was a question. This has to do with the OCRF did fund Western pond turtle nesting habitat creation in a wetland preserve that I have been working on to recover for Western pond turtles. And the project that I would like to apply for this time would be not in that area, but in an adjacent area where there is upland habitat that needs to be restored for the turtles. Now, with that, because I got that funding before, would it be inappropriate for me to apply for upland habitat restoration for the Western pond turtle?
So you are thinking exactly where I was going. So thank you for that question. So you can absolutely apply as long as your past project is in good standing. So what I was just describing was a situation that for the winter 2023, a single organization can have multiple projects in the mix as long as they're not connected. Your example is, can you have the same project show up in different RFPs? So you've been funded before. I believe you were funded in 2020. Can you apply now for the 2023? Absolutely. You can apply for an adjacent project, or you can apply for the same project, as long as you're in good standing. And what we mean by good standing is that for your past project, you met all of your deliverables. And if you didn't, you were able to explain in your project report why. You spent all the monies for your project or what you were able to within the scope of your work, and all paperwork has been filed and completed. So an example for this is we have a project that we funded, I believe almost in the same round as you, for a community survey. They got funded last round for the exact same community survey, just the continuation, because they finished their first project. Those monies were completed, reported, and they wanted to continue. You can also do, as you described, a add-on project. You did your first project. It was done, kind of a phase 1. Now you're interested in doing a phase 2. That's completely allowed.
Thank you.
Charlotte, this is Brian Clapp. I have another question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I have essentially the same, well, I do not, I'm the noxious weed supervisor. And there are several areas where, like, we have a wildlife management area and access and habitat property where their ODFW is working with the landowners, and on one side of the valley. And on the other side, the county has a 4,000 acre recreation area, and it's surrounded by ODFW access and habitat and forest service. I wanted to do noxious weed control or native plant protection projects on both, but I think I would need about 30,000 each. If they're not for the same landowner, the only thing tying them together would be the access and habitat program, and me being the financial manager, or I could write it and give it to ODFWs to apply. Would that be better?
So that would be a little bit of a nuanced project kind of split, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. So there's going to be pros and cons that would be specific for you. The short answer to this is, so that everyone can hear, is that you can apply for each location separately. If you know you need 30 or 40,000 for each location, you can have project A, this part of town, project B, this part of town. They might be doing the same thing, but if you get funding for part A or town part A and not town part B, that doesn't stop you from doing your work over here. That said, there might be a benefit if you could look at your numbers and to maximize it, to try to fit it within 50,000 so that you could do work on both and only have one project in. And we can always talk about that. That said, you can also always have project partners put in projects also. So change up who is your primary applicant if it's a team working together.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, not hearing any more. So I do also want to stress that there is a new institutional/organizational indirect rate cap put at 20% of requested project budget. So this is a little bit nuanced, just to make sure that people are clear. So that is the primary applicant can only request 20% of their expended budget. So therefore, in this example would be, if you want to expend, I don't know, $40,000, you can only ask for 20% of that 40,000 and then tack that on to get your final budget calculation. You cannot just say, all right, well, my budget is $50,000. I know I'm going to ask for the most. Let's do 20% of 50,000, figure out what that is, and then get the rest of my numbers within the calculation of that. It's nuanced, and I'm happy to talk about that, but that's 20% of your expended budget, not of your total budget. And also what we want to make sure here is that if you have project partners, you are not able to each take overhead. So the primary applicant can take overhead. Any sort of subsidiary individuals that are part of your project receiving funding would just be written in as either just receiving supplies, or they would be a contractor and they would have to kind of cost out what they would need to support their organization through that contract. Nuanced, happy to talk through that if anyone has any questions, but that is a key kind of new change. And also project insurance guidelines. OCRF does require insurance. You can go on our website and see these insurance requirements. We acknowledge insurance might be new for some of these organizations like yourself. So do not think insurance is a barrier. We highly encourage you to either incorporate into your overhead costs if you can, or you can actually request the cost of insurance as an other line item. So if you already are like, I need 20% as my overhead and I need insurance, and some of our smaller organizations need that, that's not a problem. We can do that and help you with that. There is small situations where the rate of insurance costs end up being higher than what a project anticipated. And then there is a small pot of money we can help supplement that. And the moral of this is basically, make sure if you want to apply as long as you meet our other guidelines, and we'll help you navigate the insurance after that. So you can see at the bottom of the screen, our application page, and we will walk through that in just 1 second. So this is what you're going to see. I'll go live to this page in just a second. For your landing page for the application, you'll see up at the top in this call out, hopefully you can see my cursor, is where you're going to find these links. And unfortunately, they're not very clear, but it's right there online and written. And we'll talk about that. So this is the thing that I do want to stress that's a little bit new and hopefully is not going to be any sort of a barrier, but it's a little bit cumbersome. For those of you that have applied the last round of OCRF applications, so the one that closed in October of 2022, for lack of a better phrase, it was a little bit of a mess. Our online system crashed. So we are going to try to prevent that. The ODFW and OCRF are in the process of getting a really new slick online system completely separate of Google Forms. We're in the contracting period now. That's not going to go live until next fall, if not early the following year of 2024. So we're a little bit in Band-Aid mode, and this is the model that we're going to be using for at least this round. The benefits of this is that we are now asking for your application to be in a Word document or a PDF. This allows you to use your space as you wish. We are now allowing you to embed photos, tables, graphs within this document. We can talk through it in a second. And that lets you use your space how you want and you to visually display your information without having to deal with word counts or cutoffs or anything like that. There's still per question guidance, and we'll walk through that together, but it should provide you more freedom and flexibility and the ability to work offline much easier instead of having to work offline, go online, work offline. That said, we still have an online questionnaire. This has about 11 questions. It should be really, really short. I recommend that you do your project questionnaire after your proposal form. And the reason for that is that it does ask you to drop and paste your abstract, drop and paste a couple of sentences here and there that are repetitive to your project form. So you might be thinking, why do we still have the questionnaire? The reason for that is for project management purposes. This questionnaire collates all of my information about your contact information, your project title, your region, your location, instead of me having to manually pull it out of your applications. So I kind of thank you in advance for at least for helping us with the project management by doing this additional questionnaire. That said, please make sure that by midnight on March 27th, I need both of these forms submitted to me. So the written proposal will be emailed and there's instructions on that front page. The questionnaire is still in Google Forms. When you go to your questionnaire, it will remind you to email me your written proposal. When you email me that written proposal, you'll get an auto response that says, remember, go do your questionnaire. So please give yourself time to do both before the due date. I'm just going to pause. I see a question. So one thing I do want to just kind of go over, and then we're going to go
Charlotte,
to the, oh, please go
I-
ahead.
I'm sorry, but to stop you from going ahead in this important part, you said you were talking about in the previous slide, you were talking about the 20%, we can request for 20% of the total amount that would be the project amount. And that would include insurance. And you said a word I don't understand, expended budget.
Good. Thank you for asking for that clarification. So basically, expended budget, it's jargon. So I will apologize for using it, but it's what you're actually like asking to buy. So if your budget is like, I want to buy seeds, I want to pay my staff, and I want to cut down some trees, that comes to $40,000. But then you're like, well, I kind of need to run my organization as well. So I need overhead. So say you ask for your overhead, whatever rate, you're going to laugh because I can't do the math in my head, say 10%. So you get to have 10% of the $40,000 that you have as supplies, then you add that onto your final budget.
Thank you.
And remember that once you kind of add that overhead back on, so then your total amount is what you ask for. But what we've been having issues is that you can't ask for overhead on your overhead. So if you max out at 50%, you're like, oh, well, I just want my overhead on my 50%. And then you back calculate, you end up getting more overhead than what you request, which isn't the way we're allowed to do it.
So Charlotte, just to clarify, so that additional project overhead we're allowed to add on to our total proposed project cost can only be up to 20% of the total project cost. Is that right?
Up to 20% of your expended budget.
Okay.
So now I'm going to do some math and you're all going to allow to laugh at me. So if you want 20%, say your budget's $10,000 and that's $10,000. Using our example, you bought seeds, you paid your staff, and then we cut down some trees. You want 20% to run your organization. So if your budget's 10,000, you're allowed to ask for 20%, which is 2,000. And then your total request that you ask the OCRF for is 12,000.
Okay, good, thanks.
So you're allowed to do that up until your total request cannot go over 50,000. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much. That helps a lot.
Okay. And it's super awkward. So when in doubt, if you have a question about your budget, please reach out. I am more than happy. I obviously can't tell you is like your cost of seed reasonable. That's not my job. But what I can tell you is, did you do your like buckets right? What I recommend kind of parsing things out from supplies to travel, from travel to other, and then make sure that you calculated your overhead correctly.
Charlotte, would you prefer, instead of like breaking things out, like instead of having like a lower admin fee, instead of 20%, have a lower percentage and then break down like staff time and all of that, staff time, equipment usage and all that? Or would it be better to just say, if say I used for $40,000, if I put $40,000 for contracting, to hire contractors to do the work, and $8,000 admin fee, which would be the 20% of 40, and that would wrap up all my time, you know, doing the reporting, help going out in the field, equipment, travel, everything.
So that is project specific. So in your example, if your physical staff that do not work for your organization, like if you just want to hire it out, that is completely fine. You can put all of your expenses under contractor then you just basically say, my contractor got $40,000 to cover their travel, blah, 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 blah. When you report to me if your project is funded, I just need a receipt from the contractor. You don't have to parse out everything if you're using outside staff to do the work. If you're using your own staff, then you need to line out what your personnel costs and your supplies and your seed and whatever you were doing.
Well, I just meant, would it be better to break down the work that I would do by hours and like you said, hours and equipment usage and what I was doing specifically, or just lump it under admin based off the percentage of the grant? Because I have to go out there, line out the contractor, go follow up on with the contractor, often go out and touch up or work in the field with them. And I could, as long as I have the money through the admin, then I can go fund all of that, and I or indirect or whatever you want to call it. Would that be make it the numbers simpler? I could just have 2 lines on a budget.
I'm happy to talk offline. I do think
Okay,
that's no. I think it's a good example. The short answer to that is budgetarily, that's your discretion. My hesitation in what I would tell for everyone is that we do use your budget to help clarify what your project is. So if there is project management costs that are critical for your project to be accomplished and they're rolled up under admin, that's fine, as long as somewhere in your project, even your budget description, it clearly says admin is to include project management. So that is the nuanced aspect of kind of my hesitation with your example.
Okay, thank you.
Charlotte. Hi, this is Greg Woolley. What kinds of admin would you consider under administrative cost or under overhead that would fall under that category of funding? What sort of admin related work?
Yeah, that's a great question. The easiest way to describe that is we are very loose with how we interpret administrative / indirect. The answer that I give to people is whatever is essential behind the scenes work to make your project function. Great examples would be paying for insurance, paying for the rent of the building you use as your office, paying for your office supplies and your computer, or paying your accountant or your secretarial needs. So things that are directly related to success of the project, but are quiet behind the scenes that if they're missing, you can't do your work, but you would never imagine you needed them to do your work. It's nuance, like rent on a building, things like that, we totally allow. That's why we don't necessarily require you to line item out what your indirect costs go towards. It's only essential to line item out your indirect costs if it's something that is explicit to the success of your project that we would want to see elsewhere, such as the example that was just shown as project management. You can wrap that in. We often pay for executive assistants and or program executive kind of positions, like a individual that's maybe not boots on the ground on the project, but has to be seated in order for the program to run. So those type of positions.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful, Charlotte.
And that's actually one of the reasons, because we allow flexibility of what you're allowed to use your indirect for. That's why we have a cap of 20%. What you'll notice is that's a cap for everyone from universities to the smallest of our 501c3s. And that's because we allow that flexibility. That said, there's obviously ethical accounting to the point that, I mean, you can't take your indirect and like buy a new car unless the new car is like operational for your group. So use obviously programmatic judgment, but many, many things are allowable into that category.
Thanks.
Great. Hey, are there any other questions about kind of budget expenses and stuff like that at this time? Okay. So let's see if I have. So I'm going to go through committee evaluation really fast, and then we're going to go actually into our forms so I can kind of clunk you through what we have. So our review process for the OCRF is a twofold process. First, all of the projects are given to a technical review team, primarily ODFW staff, and they're going to be reviewing your project using these same criteria as what you can see up here: clarity, cost efficiency, timeline, outdoor equity. That's why I stressed it at the beginning. I do not care if you're only collecting data or running stream flow models, or if you're out in the field with school kids. Outdoor equity needs to be part of your project. Also impact and scale of the project actions, track record of the applicant, just to make sure that this is, you'll see within the questionnaire, is expressed in many different ways. Like, do you and your team have the skills to do it? Or do you know where to kind of phone a friend through partnerships and or hire a contractor to do it? And that's reflected in your projects. Appropriate partnerships, huge one. Many of our projects are amazing, but they fail because of lack of partnerships. We really, really want these OCRF projects to be embedded in networks of people. So find some partners, think about your partnerships. You're all going to be impacting somebody somehow, somewhere, or needing someone for something for somehow. So think about where really to make that meaningful. Measurability, really, like, are you using the right tools, the right methods? How do you know you succeeded your goals? How do we know what success in the results or your project was? And then also really the intersection of how does your project really deal with the mission and the goals of the OCRF, and specifically the Oregon Conservation Strategy. So even our outdoor rec projects need to think about the Oregon Conservation Strategy and how are you being conservationally minded in your work. So this is my last slide here. Just remember, we have another informational similar to this coming up on March 10th. It will be identical to this one, but just for those that didn't get an opportunity, or if you have some more questions later on. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And now I'm going to go to, if I can get my Zoom to work, our online application. So before I share and I lose all of your faces or those that have their videos on, do you have any questions that came up before I kind of go to our next thing?
I still have lots of questions, but I'll probably just do it in an email. It'll make life a little easier.
Okay, and you are my last agenda for the Friday before a long weekend, so I am happy to stay on as long as you guys want. I have no more meetings today.
Charlotte?
Mm-hmm.
You were mentioning about, you know, the evaluation process includes paying attention to the alliances and partnerships that the project it would involve. So, for instance, if I had a fiscal carrier for this project to be Soil and Water Conservation District, for instance, their administration services would be capped at 20% in the project expended budget. But if I were also partnering with other organizations in like a high school and so on and so forth, that would count, right?
So I'm hearing a couple questions here. So I'm going to try to unpack what I heard and tell me no, totally wrong. So first thing I'm hearing is your partnerships. So your fiscal sponsor, Soil and Water District, can be your partner if they're doing something in addition to just holding your money. So if they are giving you staff time or intellectual thought or coming to your field site and helping you, that's a partnership. Someone just holding your money for you, that's a fiscal sponsor. I would assume they would be a real partner in this. So that would be my first kind of thing. And to your question about overhead, yes. your fiscal sponsor is actually normally bound by whatever your fiscal sponsorship form is. And they usually normally say, when you get a grant, we keep 5 to 10% of it. So you should already know what there is. If there is a 20%, that's fine. But even if your like individual to fiscal sponsor agreements over 20%, for some reason that you have an agreement that's 25, they can't ask for that here. They can only get to our 20%. To your other example, I think I was hearing in that was about this, if you were partnering with a school. So if your partnership with the school would absolutely be a partnership. That said, you can also help them financially in your budget. So if they need travel supplies to get their teachers or anyone to your site, budget their travel in if you have the budget. You also can help pay for their staff, or you can give them honorariums. You can give them all sorts of different things through your budget, but with the relationship of a partnership. And a partnership's a two-way. You work with them integrally into your project, not just you hand them a paper or they hand you a checkbook type of thing.
Thank you.
So I do see a question. Is there a match requirement? No, the OCRF requires no match. That said, normally with any sort of partnerships, there is that kind of the back and forth, the mutual beneficial arrangement. And we do want to see if you have in-kind match or fiscal match and stuff like that. Do we have a requirement of like a threshold of what we expect to see? No, that's very project specific. But if you're getting volunteers to show up, you should write, we have in-kind match. That means non-monetary, non-physical cash match of people on the ground. And that's part of our partnership. Or sometimes you do have match that's physical, like HOA, they can't really offer any people, but they got an extra 20K and they put it towards the project. That can also show a relationship, as long as then that HOA, if you want to list them as a partner, is doing something other than just handing over their checkbook. They're also going to be there to help distribute information to their people when the project's done, something else. I'm just pausing to check my.
Charlotte, it's Elise from Oregon Shores one more time. You mentioned the Oregon Conservation Strategy a few times. Do you have a link to a specific document that you'd like us to refer to?
Yes, absolutely. Oops. Before we sign off, I will drop that in the chat, but you can also find it actually on our website.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
And I do say that, so I see your beautiful background and you said Oregon Shore. So that's the Oregon Conservation Strategy includes our nearshore strategy. So you would most likely be most applicable to our nearshore strategy, which is a section of the larger document.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So don't think you're just kind of stuck to the dry side. That
Okay.
said, remember we are trying to think about drought and aquatic resilience and also wildfires. And that does have a clear connection to our coastal systems, especially our estuaries. So that difference of water input and salinity and all sorts of things. I mean, it's just because you're dealing with the ocean, don't think that you can't apply and that you're not applicable to the scope of what we're after. And even if you're not, still apply.
Perfect. I was thinking of applying for one of our estuary projects, so that sounds great. Thank you.
All right. How are we doing? Any other questions before we dive into the application, just so I can do a skim over and make sure that's nothing too surprising?
Charlotte, I didn't quite, I was right when you said the equity part. Do you have to have a section about equity? Because these are public areas and it's open to everybody that gets there. I mean, all the land that I'd be working on would be, it's either access and habitat or a wildlife management area or county recreation area for public. Do you just include a section talking about that, or do I need to expand on trying to bring one?
I would, so I'm going to make sure I phrase this right. Short answer is yes. The OCRF is basically our mission and our kind of the way we are focusing our work, we want every project to meaningfully think about outdoor equity and access. It's easier for some projects than others, and sometimes it's more tangible for some projects than others. So for the example you gave, it's public lands. There is actually obviously an access point to that, the outdoor equity of anyone can access it. But think about who would be accessing it and what are the communities nearby and who might want better access to it. And if any of the improvements that you're talking about doing to your land might make it more accessible. So happy to talk with you. It takes a little bit of a thought to kind of think through that. And maybe there would be some sort of, if you have any sort of outreach afterwards, that you can intentionally think about who are you outreaching to let them know, hey, I just cleaned up this public land. There is no more vines everywhere. Maybe you can come access it easier. So think about that.
A big part of it is invasive rosebush control on the wildlife management area and adjoining lands would be a large part. And so if Facebook and radio posts saying, you know, letting people know about what we're doing and you know, saying kind of, you know, come out and enjoy these areas, is that a part of it? Would that be included, or do you have to specifically target certain groups?
I would say yes, but, and I'm being vague. So the Facebook and that type of outreach would be very helpful in kind of helping to get your message out. You can think about it that way. But think about, like, is there another way that you could think about including in your project? And this goes for everyone. Not everyone's on technology, and technology doesn't reach everybody. So are there paper flyers that you could maybe think about putting in one or two places? Is there a community forum or a community event that you can advertise that would bring in other voices and other individuals that you think might not use your resources? And I'm more than happy to talk to almost anyone about this if you want some more ideas.
Yeah, and I would research community-based organizations that specifically target underserved communities, and just sending an invitation to them. I mean, you know, just do a little direct outreach. That really counts for including outdoor equity in your project.
Well, we do run a booth at the farmers market and the county fair, and there's an annual farm tour and youth education with the FFA and the 4-H, and several events throughout the year. Go and talk to the public. So
yeah, and the
like I said, it's not specifically targeted.
Yeah, and you know, the question would be, what does that public look like? You know, do they look like just the same as the people that work
Whether it's at the farmers market or the fair? I don't know. You know, it's sort of the fair. Pretty much anybody that is interested in agriculture or rides or food platform.
That's just something to think about.
Okay.
Do they represent a wide spectrum of backgrounds of people?
No.
Yeah.
And we also, so I'm more than happy to talk about this at more, but kind of the bottom line is that outdoor equity is essential to a successful OCRF project, and deliberate, thoughtful outdoor equity. And that is communicating with the public, and also when and how it's appropriate, bringing the public into your spaces. And remember my example, sometimes it's not appropriate to physically have boots on the ground, but that does not mean that you don't bring new voices and individuals into your story, into your project through other means. And it's very area specific and very region focused of who are your stakeholders, who are the underserved communities, who are the voices in the room that just maybe aren't in the room, maybe aren't aware, aren't there. So I've seen some amazing projects not embrace that aspect and not be successful in our program. And I think everyone can think about this and really be deliberate and very successful. Some of our projects that they're like, you know, I reached out to so-and-so group because I had no clue how to get my project applicable to this. And we have the best new program now. And we've had some new partnerships form like that were just someone thought they were checking a box, which we do not encourage. This is not the exercise for that, but really walked out with a meaningful, powerful, like amazing new partnership and relationship because of this type of thing. So I just kind of strongly recognize and want you all to think about that. And it's 6 points of your application. So that's enough to, if nothing else, it tanks projects as it should be because it's so important to the OCRF. All right, I will pause because I think I am talking too much and see if I can have any other questions from you guys before I briefly just go through the application so you feel familiar with it.
Just say, Brian, I could help you brainstorm with that if you like also. I know you're in Union County and, you know, it's not an urban setting, for instance, but I know you probably have. I mean, there seems to be a Latino population pretty much everywhere throughout the state, for instance, you know, because of agriculture. So anyway, I'll just put that out to you.
Well, and maybe EOU, the Eastern Oregon University, is here and right in between the two projects area, and they, I know at least the Mira, the Mount Emily recreation area, is used widely by the college students for hiking and biking and looking for mushrooms and everything else. And so maybe reaching out through EOU through some of their programs might be something I could. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And hopefully that will be another example of kind of one of the things, and it sounds a little sappy, that I love the most about the OCRF since we've started is that many of our projects very much become kind of interlinked and build networks. And we've had project partners see each other's projects and form new collaborations and move forward. And it's really quite fun to see and watch it develop. So very briefly, I just want to go through our written application. So our written application is currently online as a PDF. And there's a few ways you're welcome to download this as a PDF. If for some reason you don't like it as a PDF, email me and we can have you download it as a Word doc. I can send it to you as a Word document. The reason the Word document's not online is just because I want to make sure that the base application's archived in a non-easily editable form. In the fact that we can't have people randomly changing questions and submitting different types of applications. But that said, this is our online application, our written form this year. And there's multiple sections. So you'll see throughout we go through this application, you'll have text in red. And hopefully that this distinction in the colors, we have red and we have black. If for some reason an individual doesn't have the technology or any sort of issues seeing these different variations, like if you're not sure, was this like a question prompt or information? I acknowledge that the variation of the color is very difficult on some computers. So just reach out and I can always walk you through it. But very clearly, so this is our cover page. There's instructions underneath almost every single section, like project title, make sure it's 10 words or less. This is not your abstract, it's a title. Your abstract, we want it to be 100 words or less. Roughly, I mean, I'm not going to sit there and scan your word count and say, you had 152 words. I'm going to throw this out. That's not the intent. The intent is to make you think about how to be clear and concise. If you need to go roughly over the word counts, that's fine. We just ask you don't change the page counts. Like for this section 1, it says fit everything on a page. Easily should be able to fit everything on a page. Not going to go through each of these sections, but I do want to do some highlights. So project overview, you should have one typed page for this section. We allow you to make sure that your project information is legible and understandable. So I highly encourage you to keep the different headings, like leave in project objectives or denote somehow that that section's project objectives, project measures of success. Make sure that you use some sort of tagging so that as a reviewer reads your proposal, you understand what we're reading. Also, you're welcome to use any sort of font that is legible and clear. I know that there's all sorts of preferences between the different types. We don't care. Make sure it's not like saying cursive in some crazy or wingding or whatever type of thing, so we can read it. Also, we do ask that your application is written in English. We are in the process of trying to support other languages, but we aren't there yet. So if you do need language services, let us know, and we can try to accommodate where and how we can. Also, just basic formatting really should be size 11 font or larger, any sort of spacing you want. Keep the margins within reason. If you really need narrow margins, probably try to be a little more clear, but your page limits need to be there. So use formatting to your benefit, and that's going to be one of the attributes this time. Also, you're welcome to use any sort of tables or pictures. So your timeline, if you want to use kind of one of those, I'm going to say the word wrong, Gantt charts, kind of the tables with the lines to kind of do your tracking with time, go for it. Or just use words. This is going to give you the visual capability of walking through things how you want. So a couple things here, project narrative, 2 pages for this, kind of alignment with your project, the background, implementation, justification. Remember, you really are supposed to talk about if and how your project deals with drought. That's going to be really important in these sections. Next is kind of your project budget. This is where you have flexibility. You can just type out your funds requests as just a bulleted list. You can use a table, however you want. Matching funds and in-kind funds, just describe if you have them, what it means to the project. You have a page to do this. Project partners, really key. You have about a page to do this, so 1 page or less. So feel free to use your space as you want. All of the word counts are approximate. Remember, if you have 406 words, I am not throwing out your application. If you have 670 words, I probably wouldn't look very kindly on it. That said, if you're still within your page limit and you needed those words from another section, it's probably going to be perfectly fine. So just use judgment here. I'm going to quickly go to stop sharing and see if you guys have any other questions. So the Google form is very simple. I'm not going to go through it mainly because it's not really set up for, it's one of those you enter it and you have to click through, but it's basically all the information in your cover page, which is why I said do your written application first. So it's like your title, your name, your email. The only thing that's going to be kind of something for you to keep track of is on the Google form, we do ask for your federal tax ID number. So please have that ready. If for some reason you don't have it and you're like, I'm like, it's midnight and I need to submit, just put will supply later for only that line is the only one I will allow. So if you're like against the clock and you don't have your federal ID number, you know you are illegal 501c3, just write in the line, I'll submit later and I'll contact you for it. Everything else you are required to submit on the time. So it is 2 o'clock. I must have fibbed and thought I would talk not so long, but I am here as long as you guys still have questions. So please feel free to let me know if there's anything else I can kind of walk us through.
Charlotte, could you talk more about, there was a piece about how do outcomes align with the OCRF priorities?
Yes, so thank you for that. And apologies, I couldn't see who was talking. Do you mind saying your name?
Oh, this is Melissa Ousley.
Oh, perfect. Sorry. My screen's all set up weird. So really that goes back to the original slides that I provided, and I'm going to be posting those along with this recording. It's really going back to how does your project align with conservation and or recreation and the mandates that were outlined in the original OCRF and our expenditure framework. And that's really thinking about how do we get Oregonians out into nature, conservationally minded? How does your project tie to the Oregon conservation strategy? What sort of priority species and or habitats are you looking at? What type of education or outreach are you conducting? And most importantly, in that is don't forget the outdoor equity and sharing of information. And that I'm more than happy to kind of redirect you to those areas as well within our documents, but really just how do you link to the purposes of the grant program?
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Okay, Charlotte, I know this is on your website. Oh, excuse me. Do you want to go, or I'll just go ahead? I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure who that
Yeah,
was.
Greg, and then we'll go to Tom.
Yeah, okay. So I know this is on the webpage, but could you just talk through the grant review process timeline? When the proposals are reviewed, when they're approved, when the awards happen, when projects can start, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It is on the website, but I did not touch it here. So our grants will be closing March 27th. And we have a pretty lengthy review process. They first go through our technical review team, and then it goes through our OCRF advisory committee. Our OCRF advisory committee is slated to do final selection of these projects in May. Then these selected projects will go to the ODFW commission in June. And then dependent on the project, it will have roughly another 2 months or more through contracting. So do not expect funds to be released until August 1st at the earliest. So sometime in August, funds will be available to spend. The way that our grants are set up is that they are primarily based on reimbursement. So once you have a signed contract, sometime mid-August, beginning to mid-August, then you can start spending money. Any expenses before your signed contract cannot be put into the grant. So basically, you got your signed contract, it's after August 1st of 2023, start collecting your receipts based on your project, you can send them to me. That said, we do set up prepayment grants in certain circumstances where if you don't have the capital to start your project, we will prepay you your grant amount, and I'll always work with you to make sure. We don't prefer to do that method, but it's there. So don't think that you have to have this stockpile of capital to get reimbursed for something. And we can also do a mixture. So Greg, did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. Thanks. So it sounds like it's not going to work for a summer program this summer, but maybe the
No.
following summer.
Exactly. And our projects, we allow you to do 2-year projects. We do and have done 3-year projects. If you're just like, you need 2 summers, but the summer ain't going to work, we will let you do that subsequent summer.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Charlotte. That was a really good presentation. And Greg kind of asked what I was going down we're about to ask about, but just a follow-up maybe. So as you said, in May, the OCRF committee will make their recommendations, and then it goes to another ODFW committee after that. So would we know whether we are anticipated to be awarded in May? Because I'm thinking of a project that we'd be spending money in, say, September, October, so it'd be very close. But yeah, could you just speak a little bit more about kind of the award decision to the applicants?
Yeah, absolutely. So the OCRF Advisory Committee selects the projects for recommendation, and that will be in May. And after they make their selection, I will inform applicants to say your project was selected or your project was not selected. Then those selected projects go to the ODFW Commission for funds approval. It's kind of a 2-check system.
Mm-hmm.
And the projects are not fully approved until they go to the commission. And that will be in June 16th or 17th.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm already slated for that. So those are set. And you'll be found out again after that saying your project that was recommended was actually selected for funding.
Okay.
Thank you. That answers
Yeah.
it.
And Tom, I can't speak for the current commission, but as a former commissioner, we put a lot of faith in the recommendations from the technical review and, the advisory committee. And in my experience, there weren't projects that were recommended. We do scrutinize and ask a lot of questions, but have a lot of confidence in the recommendations that we receive. Or I'm saying that now for the past, but that's kind of how the process goes.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for that background.
Yeah, I can say in my tenure, which is about a year, which is half the life of the OCRF, I've never seen the selected project list not go through committee or the commission. I've been hesitant that additional projects might have been tacked on to that approval list to get some more funding out the door, but we've always had that mirror of what was put forward was pushed through or brought through.
Yeah, that's true. There's so many good projects that the commission wants to fund at a certain specific amount of money. And so I've seen the commission say, we really like your project. We're going to see if there's additional money, that we can put to it. So that's, positive, kind of optimistic outlook.
Yeah. And that's why we do that really strange, very carefully worded emails of your project was selected versus your project was funded, because there is a nuanced. And those information goes to all applicants. We let you know if you were selected or not selected, or funded or not funded.
Are there specific landowners or areas that are not allowed for funding?
So that is a nuanced question. We fund throughout the state, and we have a priority to be cognizant of making sure our funding goes throughout the state. So if we have all the projects, and I'll pick on my own town area in Albany, New York, in that area, Albany, Oregon. If all of them are focused in Albany, Oregon, I used to live in Albany, New York as well, and now live in Albany, Oregon. We will be very, very scrutinizing of those, because we want to make sure that they're spread throughout the state. There is no part of the state that cannot receive funding, but there is parts of the state that have received more funding than others, so might not be as desirable for the advisory committee to select. Specifically, our Eastern Oregon area is just, we don't get as many applicants. We're always trying to make sure good projects from those areas are supported. Also, many of our metro areas, we want to make sure that they're very well supported. Our Willamette Valley is like front and center, so we're very scrutinizing of those projects. That said, to your point about landowners, is that a private landowner cannot apply unless they have a 501c status or have a fiscal sponsor. That said, private lands are a tough area for us, because then you get into that concept of outdoor equity and outdoor access, like who can access them. We are using state dollars. So we're very, very critical when it's privately owned lands.
This would only be land signed up in the Access and Habitat Program to allow public recreation, hunting, hiking, all that. They're in and around the wildlife management area or the MIRA, and that. But there's also Forest Service right next to there, and I was wondering if the federal lands, if that included as well or not.
We can do federal lands. This will be our last round that we're most likely allowing federal lead organizations to apply. But once again, it all comes down to, remember, we're using state dollars, state taxpayer dollars. We need to make sure that this is for the betterment of everybody, plants, animals, and humans, not just selective use for like your own personal backyard type of situation. And then that said, the individual still needs to be applying under the 501c3 status. Also, if it's an access and habitat project, think or past funded project, think very, very strategically if we're for the right source. Because if you could have, or maybe should have been funded by an access and habitat grant, our board will ask, why aren't you going to them? If you are a better alignment with their needs and their missions, we are all ODFW. So even our technical review staff, I have those individuals on my tech staff. They flagged project and said, I don't know why this is to you, this should go to me, type of thing. And that will kind of weigh in. So think about that strategically.
Well, and I'm the one getting the information and sending it out to the ODF partners and the other partners in the area. Honestly, none of this land is mine. I'm just volunteered to sit in on the meeting and potentially write the paper, do the paper. So, all right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm kind of hearing the voices kind of wind down. I am more than happy to hang out a little while, or you all should have my email based on the website. Please feel free to kind of sit and digest this. It's Friday before holidays, so everyone's mind's a little bit elsewhere. If you kind of think about something, you're like, whoa, I would have loved to ask that, or I can't be bothered to write an email. Can I pick up a phone? I would say try emailing me first. I am notoriously leaving my work phone places, so I don't pick it up all the time. So if you call me and you're like, I couldn't get through, send me an email and we'll set up a time to chat on the phone or visually or however you want to communicate in the method that works for you. If you're in the Salem-ish area, you're also welcome to set up an in-person meeting. We actually can see face-to-face if you're around. If not, this always is a great way to interact too. But feel free to reach out. And as I said, if you call my cell and I do not pick up, it's not because I did not want to speak to you. It's because I hate electronics. And I think my inbox is full again, and I have to clean it out. All right, so I highly encourage you all to apply. You got plenty of time. As I said, the online application questionnaire should only take you a couple minutes. Your application should not be taking you like extensive amounts of time, but it'll take a couple hours to be very thoughtful and deliberate about what your project is. And my last kind of word of advice is that we want you to be clear and concise and meaningful. We are not after your spelling, your grammar, your punctuation. If English is not your first language, as long as we understand what you're trying to say, we do not care. I am not the grammar police. Otherwise, I would not have a job. So that is not part of what we read as clarity.
I actually just thought of another question real quick. Sorry.
That's okay.
It doesn't need to be, you can be fairly general, right, about as far as the species you're trying to protect or what the area you're trying to conserve. I mean, the contrast would be, in particular, it would be for either treating of noxious invasive weeds and then potentially reseeding it, although I think the seed has already been bought through Access and Habitat, so that would be a match. But in and around the areas on the public lands, do I have to have a specific animal or plant or something that I'm trying to focus this on other than native habitat and recreational, specifically for the areas where everyone in town goes to recreate?
You need to be as specific as your project goals so that you're as measurable as your outcomes need to be. Yes, that is not a deliberate answer. But I mean, if you go in saying, I want to increase food webs in my area, that's great. You better tell me what links in the food web you're going after so that we know measurably what to look for. If you're trying to say, I have an area that is recreationally used, and I want to make sure that it's conservationally focused so that it stays a nice area for humans and everybody to use, that everybody could be all the general plants and animals that have the area. I would think strategically about if there's species of conservation interest in there. Like if we have white-headed woodpecker as an example in your area, I'd list it, highlight the fact that it's there. Your actions may not deliberately affect them, but it might make a better area that they would want to come to.
Okay.
So really it comes down to your project and what you're trying to achieve, because what you outline is going to be what we want to make sure is measurable.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Mostly what I'm trying to do is fill in the gaps between what the county has for funding, what Access and Habitat has for funding, and what Lad Marsh Wildlife Management Area has, because nobody has enough funding to actually do all the work. And Rocky Mountain Oak Foundation and the Blue Mountain Habitat Restoration Council are working on some of the lands as well for the annual grasses because of fire concerns and the droughts and displacing the native grasses. So I've tried, but there's a lot of gaps in there that I would.
So I would
contractors in place.
So in your example, and this might go to everybody. So I do realize people are kind of diving off, but this is recorded, so I can always make sure people hear this. So if you are looking for stopgap funding and or piecemeal funding, as you just described, like you have little bits of money to do a bunch of different things here and there, make sure that to the best of your ability, what you're asking for the OCRF is distinct and measurable and independent, but collaborative. Like in your big realm of what you're doing, if you're doing planting seed and cutting trees and blah, 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 and blah, 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 make sure if you're asking for invasive weed removal, like you want to spray, cut, whatever, make sure that that is a distinct thing that might benefit from your other pots of money. But if your Rocky Mountain elk, hypothetically, money falls through, you can still accomplish your OCRF mission and goal. We've had issues with that in the past where it was like contingent upon, and if another pot of money falls through, the reviewers see that in your projects, not that pot of money fell through, but that contingency aspect, and that's not very measurable. You get ranked really low if we see that like cause and effect link.
Well, in particular for the Mount Emily recreation area, it's like I said, it's 4,500 acres. It was commercial timber ground that the county bought because it was going to be subdivided right on the face next to town. And it has the biking trails and hiking and camping. You can hunt up there, just everything for the town to access. They've had to do a bunch of thinning to try and, for their fire plan recently, and they have a certain budget for weed control that out of their 4,000 acres controls might help with about 1,500, 2,000 acres. You definitely can't get it all. And with this new thinning, it is really expanding the disturbance, really increase the invasive plants. And so it's more of we have money to treat about 1,500 to 2,000 and trying to use that, trying to see if there's money to apply to make sure and get everything that needs to get done so that the public doesn't go in and recreate and spread it back to their homes and up on the forest and everywhere else, but also they get to go up and enjoy this native, this hillside native habitat as much as much as it is native. I mean, it was commercial timber ground a long time ago, but we've worked hard to try and restore that.
So that example sounds totally within the scope of what's appropriate. It's additive, and that's not a problem at all. So what you would do is say, I have or I'm expecting money to do 15,000 acres. The money I'm asking for will do a different 15,000 acres, and kind of, it could be the same type of thing. They could be additive, but if you lose one pot of money, you are not stuck on your other.
Okay. Yeah, no, it wouldn't be contingent on it. Just, there's some money going in, there's just never enough money to get all the work done.
Yeah.
And well, in particular around the Lad Marsh, that the other area, ODFW has been working with the landowners with the access and habitat and on the Lad Marsh Wildlife Management area to treat the invasive roses coming in across that hillside and taking over. It's where everybody goes up to. It's the other place. If people don't go to Mirror, they go the other direction. And they had a individual come in and protest the treatment. And it was perfectly legal. There was nothing wrong, but it scared ODFW enough to where they said, okay, no more on the access. We're not going to do the access and habitat properties now, which they've been working on for years. And so without me coming in and the money going through me, the work's probably going to not happen. And all those roses are going to start filling in that access and habitat property, which is then going to keep spreading back onto the ODFW. And I don't know if I don't think that's a set in stone decision, but for now, that's what the decision was made this year, just because they were scared of litigation, or essentially, even though there was nothing wrong with the work being done. Actually, I mean, they're following the law. You can't have noxious weeds on your property. So.
Okay, well, I would definitely say, so that sounds, well, definitely nuanced. So make sure that when you put forward your application that you kind of, I would be transparent about kind of what this situation is, but you've listed a bunch of organizations kind of in there. So think about making sure that you reach out to the ODFW and the primary landowner and things like that, and make sure they're part of your project list. And also clearly make sure you highlight who they are, so that, especially for our ODFW technical review team, I need to know who has insight on a project and also who has conflict of interest on projects. And that does go for everyone. there is a question about conflict of interest on your application. And it's very clear to make sure that you, even as your applicant, and or if you think there would be other conflicts of interest, to highlight those. They don't count against you, but they hypothetically. But we do need to make sure that we are transparent and that we know where everyone's connected. Because I mean, it's Oregon, we're all connected.
Right. Okay. Well, and once I get more details, I'll be emailing you more specific questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
awesome. Well, I see our group slowly diminishing. Are there any other voices in the room that kind of have questions, or if you guys are just absorbing your Friday afternoon? Okay, hearing none. Then I might wrap this up. Brian, did you have any other questions since we're on, or you're welcome to set any sort of additional meeting with me. I'm happy to walk through your project more.
Well, and so I was actually, while we were talking, I've been composing an email to all the ODFW, Access and Habitat, and the wildlife guys and everybody, because I haven't even, the recreation area, I have never even met the new manager. They just hired a new guy. So I talked to his boss and he said, yeah, this is a good idea, but I've never even met them. So I need to find out what they're doing so we're not doing overlap. And
Yes.
And if I'm going to write something so I can show all the match being done, I go out and work on these properties. I've already talked to both contractors that work on the two properties and got the estimates of what it would cost. And that's why I'd ask. It sounds like it's going to be about 30,000 each, but I mean, if it makes more sense to just, I know you said you didn't like a nice round number of 50,000, but if I just said, okay, say 20 or 20, right around 20,000 a piece, and I took the admin to go and help them.
Well, so in that example, so if you have estimates, what you would do in your budget, what you would say is that we have two properties, one's estimated for 33,000, one's estimated for 34,000. We're asking for 50 so that we can do all of property A and the distinct units of blah, blah, and blah on property B. So you can line item that out.
Okay. Well, and essentially, I think I'm going to come at it with 20,000 is better than no money. So, rather than me writing multiple grants.
Yeah.
I already have like 4 other grants I work on.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. And we've done 50. I mean, don't say we fund $50,000 grants, even numbers across the board, but they're hard to sell, I would say. They're harder to sell.
Well, I have specific, one of the contractors is 55 an hour and the other one is 65 for himself and then 45 for his staff. So I can, what I'll do is, at least with the way I do with all with OWEB or state weed board grants, is that I say this, I'm going to hire a contractor for this specific amount of hours and this specific amount of acres of weeds treated. And it hardly ever comes out to a round number unless I use decimals. So I doubt it'd be 50. I'm just saying, around that number.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
And I was
Awesome.
just going to use everybody else's time as match, even though you don't need the match. But
And yeah, and you don't have to calculate match out to like the dollars and cents. You just say 50 hours of so-and-so or organization. Like match is not required. It's used to show basically success of a project. Like, do we know you can actually do the project? Okay.
All right. I'll send it out to everybody and get their information, what they want, and and then I'll get back to you once I have a better idea.
Okay. Sounds great. Well, thank you. And thank you to our other person on the line still. Hopefully this was helpful to both of you. This recording will be posted. And as I said, always reach out to myself. My information's on our website, and I will also be hosting another one of these on March 10th.
Cool. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.
Happy long weekend.
Thanks. You too.